Thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you talking to me. We're going to discuss Wheaton precious metals, obviously. We'll talk a little bit about the gold and the silver price, a little bit about the macro background, and maybe a few questions about you, if that's okay.
That sounds good. Pleasure to be here, John, and happy to be talking with you.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I suppose the topic that's on everybody's list at the moment is COVID-19. It's been a shocking impact on the global economy, probably helped out gold and silver prices as well. So very much topical for this conversation. And I'm interested in speaking to you as the CEO of a company. What sort of strategic planning did you have in place that might have helped you prepare for something that really so unexpected as COVID-19?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, we're, this is something that I don't think anyone expected, especially the magnitude of the pandemic and the shutdown. Fortunately, we and like a lot of companies, we had really good business continuity plans already in place in the event of any, natural disaster or anything along those lines. And so those just kick-started. We shut down our offices and shifted to a work-from-home environment. Our business is really about being agile, about being mobile, visiting lots of mine sites, lots of operations, lots of investor conferences and stuff like that. And so we're a business that was already pretty well tuned to be working mobile. And so shifting to the work from home environment probably, I was going to say it probably a slight improvement in productivity. Definitely shifted in and didn't even lose any speed in our sense. We've been able to continue focusing on new opportunities, but also staying in touch with their existing opportunities and seeing if there's ways that we can help our partners. And so it's didn't even skip a gear.
Has it had much of an impact upon your partners? What's happened in terms of Wheaton's production? And what's your outlook for the rest of 2020?
Yeah, it's we just updated our guidance for the year at our Q2 conference call about a couple of weeks ago. So we have 6 operations, 3 in Peru and 3 in Mexico, and those 6 operations were suspended. Mexico and Peru, of course, asked all the mines to shut down for a period of time. So ultimately, we've lost about 5% of our production for the year. We updated our guidance. Our original guidance was centered around 705,000 gold equivalent ounces to be produced over the course of the year. Our new guidance is now around 670,000 gold equivalent ounces. But we've seen enough strength in our portfolio that we haven't made any adjustments to our 5-year guidance, which is an average of 750,000 gold equivalent ounces over the next 5 years, inclusive of this year. So, obviously we see some upside. The assets every asset is up and running now. Some of them at 100%, some of them even better than 100%. So we're having, as was seen in our second quarter results, we've seen a pretty good response back in terms of production. But overall, about a 5% impact in production for the year.
Okay, thank you. Now, does Wheaton expect to see more or less streaming opportunities in the precious metal space, given we appear to be in the midst of a gold and silver bull market?
Well, there's no doubt there's a bit more capital coming into the space. Higher prices definitely have attracted attention from a broader suite of investors, and all of that, ultimately spills into more capital being available. And our business is really supplying capital to the industry. And so there's times that it is that our capital is most attractive, and there's times that it may not be. But the way our business model works is that the only time to really invest into the industry is in the bottoms and on the sides. You don't really want to invest into new assets when commodity prices are high. And so, a real focus on making sure that we still find ways to make sure that our investments are accretive and on a go-forward basis. Now, streaming has, on a project basis, streaming has a unique attribute in the sense that it always improves the internal rate of return of these projects. And so, as I like to say, it takes a good project and makes it a great project. It takes a good mine and makes it a great mine. And so there's always going to be space for streaming in the mining industry. But we are competing against other sources of capital, and there's times if markets get frothy, then we're perhaps not the most attractive source of capital. Those are usually the times that we don't want to be investing anyways. That usually means that we've got a really strong, high commodity price environment. That's not the time to invest. That's the time to reap the benefits of all of our existing investments and build up the war chest to prepare ourselves for the next time that it makes more sense to be, making sure that the acquisitions we make are accretive to our shareholders. And so it's a real focus for us. Streaming will be a part of the industry. It is a permanent part of the industry, and there's always going to be avenues there. But we need to maintain. We have to be selective about when we invest.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
What does the due diligence pipeline look like at the moment for new deals? Have you had stuff that you've been working through when metal prices perhaps weren't as high that still might come through to fruition? Have you got a number of these deals?
Yeah, during the second quarter, we announced a transaction, a little bit on the smaller side, but a very attractive asset, the Marmato project down in Colombia with Caldas Gold. Very, very attractive looking. The exploration potential there looks very strong. They've got plans to open up the lower zone, and we just really like the geology and the mineralization and what we see, the trends towards depth as to how that deposit seems to coalesce itself into something of substance, of great substance. So we're really excited about that, but it's a smaller scale opportunity. We have been looking at some very large scale opportunities. We still are working on some projects that are upwards closer to $1 billion in scale and size. Continue to push forward on these projects. They take a long time. One of the projects we're working on, the first time I visited this project was 10 years ago. And so these are things that just don't, they need to ferment for a while. And so that's what we continue focusing on, pushing forward. One of the areas that we do get a lot of benefit from is looking in the base metal sector for precious metal byproducts. With higher precious metal prices like we see right now, there's a lot of base metal companies that are looking to crystallize some of that value to help strengthen their own balance sheets, to help fund their own expansions or new acquisitions or whatever they need to focus on. And so this is a good time for the base metal companies to pursue that. And that's where we're seeing a lot of interest right now, is on that side.
No, that's fascinating. So turning back to Wheaton, what's your dividend policy? Is with a growing production base that you talk about and a very strong 5-year outlook, plus obviously higher precious metals price, is there a potential for a higher dividend at some point in the future?
Well, there most definitely is, because our dividend policy is directly linked to our cash flows. We give 30% of our cash flows back to our shareholders. Now we do average that over the previous 4 quarters to just try and smooth out some of the volatility that we find dividend investors or investors who focus on dividend don't like volatility as much, and so we do dampen that a bit by just averaging over the previous 4 quarters. But because it's directly linked to our cash flow, if we see commodity prices climb, of course our cash flow climbs, and therefore the dividend climbs. And so the current basement is 30% of our cash flow. That's by no means the end. We started off our dividend back in 2011, 2012, which was the first time that, the last bull market that we saw in precious metal prices, and we started at 20%. We're now at 30%. I have no problem envisioning us getting up to 40 or 50% of our cash flow feeding back ultimately to our shareholders. As our company grows, it gets tougher and tougher for us to invest into the ground. And if we're not investing into the ground, we return it to the shareholders through the dividend.
Yeah, it certainly may be the time for precious metals companies to stand out as being able to pay strong dividends, particularly if you look at the cuts that have come through from around other sectors around the world.
Well, and one of the reasons that we're quite happy about having it linked directly to the commodity prices, that shareholders can be confident that some of these greater returns we're going to see are coming back to them in the dividend.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Turning to perhaps the broader background, we saw a few weeks ago, Berkshire Hathaway announce the purchase of 21 million Barrick shares, representing about 1.2% of the company. Do you think this will help bring in new generalist investors into the precious metal sector?
Well, there's no doubt that Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway have a real strong following, probably one of the strongest fund followings in the world in terms of where they invest, and so there's no doubt that has caught a lot of attention and has provided some good support, and Barrick is definitely one of the best in class in terms of the operations side from a mining perspective, and so a good place to push that investment, but. John, I've got to tell you that the last time Warren Buffett invested into the gold space, there was no streaming industry. And I really do think that Warren should give me a call and get some education about that. Because when it comes to generalist investing into the precious metal space, the huge advantage of the streaming business model is that we've taken so much of the risks that were typically inherent in the mining industry, and we've limited those. The cost exposure, both the capital cost and operating cost exposure, have been taken out of the equation. And so, Warren, if you're listening, give me a call.
Yeah, if I bump into him, I'm sure to let him know.
Appreciate that.
So we've used the word bull market a couple of times in this conversation already. What do you think is the outlook for gold and silver prices at the moment? Are we in the middle of a bull market? Is there much more that potentially come? How are you thinking about the markets at the moment?
Well, it doesn't take much to see the economic impacts of this pandemic, and then the costs that we're going to have with governments having to try and support economies around the world and kickstart economies around the world. And all that means is a devaluation of the traditional fiat currencies that we see around the world. And, it's really simple math. What investors need is a store of value, something that will hold its value over this period of, for lack of a better word, helicopter money. And so it's important that gold and silver and precious metals as a whole, the growing importance of that as a store of value for investors around the world should be apparent. It's as I said, the math couldn't be any simpler in terms of what we see. And so I'm still very bullish on precious metal prices. I just think we're going to see, by no means have we seen the full economic impact of this pandemic. And as that continues to unravel and be exposed, I just think we're going to continue to see stronger and stronger pressure on precious metal prices. As a good, strong store of value that has reasonable liquidity, and it's a great place to be invested into. And I think really every generalist should be making sure that at least a portion of their portfolio is tied up into precious metals in one form or another.
Certainly, that's very much what we find with the work that we've done at the World Gold Council in looking at putting precious metals into a portfolio. And certainly the performance of gold and even silver since over the last 12 months has certainly demonstrated the diversification and returns benefits that you can have from having these precious metals in your portfolio. Changing tack slightly, Wheaton joined the World Gold Council in 2014, and you've been heavily involved with the board of the World Gold Council, held a number of leadership positions, including chair of the compensation committee and indeed vice chair of the World Gold Council. We're delighted to welcome you as our incoming chair. What role do you see the World Gold Council playing in continuing to grow gold's recognition as an essential allocation with generalist investment portfolios?
Well, look, so much of today's world is about information, access to information, and good, sound, solid information that stands the test of scrutiny and such. And the World Gold Council has done an excellent job. John, yourself have done an excellent job in terms of pushing, being an advocate for what the importance of gold and what roles it can play in today's world. We've had great success on the central banks with respect to reserves, increasing reserves, and making sure that gold is a portion of a lot of central bank reserves around the world. We've seen strong and substantial growth. Our next task, and it's a task that we have been working on, but we continue to need to make further progress in this, is more personal portfolios and funds and such and like that. And just again, making sure that everyone understands the importance of gold and how gold, having gold as a portion of your portfolio, just provides you that sound basis, that sound foundation that isn't subject to helicopter money issues and to economic stimulus challenges that we see around the world, and will always be there to deliver that solid core that you can build upon. And so, we've still got a lot of work to do on that front. But, I can tell you that the environment that we're in right now couldn't be better set up to give us the opportunity to make sure that message gets out there. And the World Gold Council, I'm honored to, I'm honored to be stepping on as, coming on as the chairman of the World Gold Council. It's a very well-respected organization that again puts out some incredible research and support for as an advocate for gold, and happy to continue supporting this whole team.
Thank you, and look, we're looking forward to having you as chair. The next topic I want to turn to is ESG, and to me this has been an interesting development in the gold space over the last few years. When I first came to the World Gold Council in 2017, of course, we knew that the efforts that were being done by the mining companies, but in terms of conversations that we were having with investors, it didn't feature very highly very often. But that's changed a lot. We're spending a lot more time talking about the ESG credentials of gold and the benefits potentially of putting gold into the portfolio for ESG issues as well as conventional returns and diversifications. Now, Wheaton's demonstrated that social responsibility goes beyond the operator. Can you share with us how a streamer can make a difference with local communities, even though they don't have direct control of the mines and their operations?
Well, first off, I come from an operating background. I played a pretty significant role in building the original Gold Corp up to its sort of peaks before I shifted over to what was Silver Wheaton back in 2007. But the key point is, coming from an operating background, very, very early on in my career, I understood, well, to be honest, it's common sense. Social license is something that's incredibly important. We in the mining industry work in some pretty remote and rural locations around the world. We have to make sure we owe it to all of our stakeholders, including locals and such. We owe it to all of our stakeholders to make sure that we deliver sustainable benefits, sustainable positive benefits to our communities, to our neighbors. And it's really, that's what it is, to our neighbors. And so at Wheaton Precious Metals, we kickstarted some pretty strong support programs for our partners. And although we don't operate, we have two things that we can share with our partners. One is our knowledge and our experience. We do see a lot of different operations around the world, so we have a pretty good sense of what works, what's effective, how to deliver the best benefits to the local communities, how to help in terms of sustainability. We know these mines will not run forever, so we got to make sure that what we leave is a net positive for anyone that's in those neighborhoods and in those communities. So that knowledge is one aspect, but the other one we can supply is financial support. And I find that this is a very effective way of working. We partner, and it's a matched partnership. So we still get the benefit of our partners' management with respect to that. But what we do know is that by stepping up and providing that support to our partners, all it does is strengthen their own social license. And we have an overlying mantra here in Wheaton that the stronger our partners are, the stronger we are. And therefore, everything we can do, we owe it to ourselves, everything we can do to try and ensure that our partners are as successful as possible. And one of the best ways to do that is through a strong ESG program, where we've long been supplying financial support and guidance to our partners to help them be more effective in terms of delivering those sustainable benefits to those communities. And so it's something that I'm very proud of. I think that what we've seen over the last few years is a real step up of the industry. Probably not so much. I think any responsible company would have been effectively doing this before, and I would argue that most of us are very responsible companies. If we weren't, we wouldn't be where we are right now. But I think it's more about the communication and about the disclosure of the efforts that we've been doing, and then it's systematic processes like the responsible gold mining principles that the World Gold Council has come out with that really do establish some baseline principles and commitments that we as member companies in the World Gold Council, but even just responsible partners of society, should attain to, should strive to make sure that we are delivering those benefits. And so it's just the right thing to do all the way across the board. And so it's long been a core part of our business, and happy to say that I think the industry is doing a lot better job too as a result of a lot of these efforts.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think the enthusiasm that the gold mining industry, and not just our members, has shown in picking up the responsible gold mining principles and committing to them, I think is an indication of the good work that they've been doing before. And now they just have to, so we say, document it in a way that is consistent and so that it can get the recognition under this framework. But as I say, we didn't get much pushback. I know that from my colleagues who've been working more closely on this.
It's a great piece of work, and that combined with the UN Global Compact and other sort of standards that we should all strive for really do set some standards that, well, in fact, I don't call them standards. I don't call them, they're baselines. We want to do better than what's defined in there. We should always be striving to be overachieving in that space, and I think the industry does. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Also, you've announced a $5 million community support response fund back in the second quarter. Can you talk about some of the programs you've started or projects that you've helped fund in response to the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, so we've got 29 different assets under contract right now, and 20 of them are delivering metal to us currently. That $5 million fund, we hope it's a one-time fund. Hopefully the pandemic comes off. But what we saw is the gold industry itself. When I look around, it doesn't take much to see that we have actually been nowhere near as heavily impacted as so many other industries and so many other people from this pandemic. And so charity is something that that is a very important part of society as a whole. And when we have the good fortune of having some success in precious metal pricing and some success on our projects, I think it's time to give some of that back. And so over and above our normal CSR program, we put together a $5 million, hopefully a one-time $5 million fund over and above to just provide some additional support. And really that $5 million was focused on providing support to the front lines to help with the risk management and help our partners in terms of limiting their possible exposures to this pandemic, especially at their sites, but in their communities around the sites, the supporting communities. And so we've put a bunch of effort in. We've bought anywhere from personal protective equipment, face masks, and gloves, and cleaning solutions and stuff like that, all the way through to funding medical equipment and ambulances and the likes. And so happy to report that probably, I'm going to say about 65% of that has already been put to work, and we're already in discussions about where the rest of that money is going to go. And so I think that by the end of the year, we'll have put it all in to try and again help our stakeholders. It's not just our partners, but it's the communities and the neighbors around that, help everyone survive through this pandemic. So it's pretty proud of the program. Very, very well received, obviously, and it just strengthens our own relationships. These are partnerships that we have with our operating partners, but also with the communities around there. And so by providing that support, trying to minimize the impact of our neighbors.
Well, hopefully it will prove to be a one-off program.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed on that one. And I think to end this, I'm going to ask you a slightly difficult or maybe nasty question. Something perhaps that people don't get asked a lot. We have successes, and Wheaton Precious Metals has been a very successful company. But we all individually and as companies have failures too. And so how has a failure or apparent failure set you or the company up for later success? Do you have a favorite failure that you'd like to share with us? I could point back to so many forks in the road of my career and such, where I kind of thought maybe I made the wrong decision, but then I happened to wind up with the right team and the right group, and I've had a very fortunate career. I've had the benefit of being part of
discovery programs, on exploration campaigns where we tied in some small scale but very, very profitable gold deposits and brought them into production. So I've had, incredible fortune in terms of working with some incredible members. Ian Telfer at Goldcorp, who I can tell you, when I first started working with Ian Telfer, I wasn't quite sure it was the right decision, but I can tell you that as a mentor for me, I learned so much in working with Ian and building up Goldcorp to where it was. But I'd have to, I think probably the one that, we created the original Silver Wheaton, which is the predecessor name to Wheaton Precious Metals, back in 2004, and then essentially ignored it for 3 years, and that was truly a failure, because the business model itself, you have to understand that at that time I was working for Goldcorp also, so we created Silver Wheaton out of the original Goldcorp, and our focus, of course, was raising capital for Goldcorp so that I could continue going out and buying new acquisitions and making new investments and buying good assets. I never really thought about the business model at Silver Wheaton from 2004 all the way through. And then, 2007, when we finished the Glamis transaction at Goldcorp, and Kevin MacArthur and Chuck Jeunesse came on board, I felt, it was time to perhaps shift focus. And we were starting to get a bit of interest in this creation that we had over Silver Wheaton, although we didn't have any full-time real focus on the company. And so I shifted over to Silver Wheaton on a full-time basis, and we put together a team in Silver Wheaton, and we really started focusing. And so I guess perhaps a failure was the fact that we came up with this very strong, very investor-friendly business model called streaming that so dramatically reduces the risk profile to investors, but so beautifully captures all the upside of a traditional mining investment, all the exploration upside, all the expansion potential, gives you full exposure because of the cost controls, full exposure to the commodity price. And then we just let it sit for 3 years and didn't do anything with it. And if I sit back and think about where gold and silver prices were in 2004 versus where they were in 2007, 8, 9, if we'd have been making a lot of investments, our company would have been substantially larger than what it is right now. So, I'd call that a bit of a miss in terms of not looking at this model and realizing that we could have really jumped onto that at a stage where we could have made an even bigger difference than what we have to date. I'd call that probably a bit of a failure, but it did set us up for some great success. So,
yeah. I wouldn't call Silver Wheaton and then Wheaton Precious Metals a failure, but maybe a bit of opportunity cost if you'd acted a little more aggressively earlier on. But
there you go. Okay.
They look like pretty big successes from my side.
Thank you.
Well, Randy, thank you very much. It's been fascinating talking to you today, and I certainly wish you and your company, of course, but also all the employees, the operators, and the communities in which you work in, a successful balance of 2020, and hopefully we can put this coronavirus behind us and see what Wheaton Precious Metals can do when it's got a full run of a year in 2021, hopefully. Thank you very much.
John, thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing to work with you at the World Gold Council. You do some great work. Your team does some great work, and so happy to continue to strengthen that relationship and keep on pushing the case for gold.